All right, great. So through the work with the after-school program and the Pittsburgh project, we were able to bring in lots of other community volunteer groups. We had groups from Pfizer, groups from Duquesne, groups from CMU coming up and working up here on this property and getting connected to the north side, getting connected to taking care of the people and the land that had otherwise been forgotten in this little neck of the woods over here. Through a series of unfortunate events, the economic downturn in the mid 2000s, we lost funding through the food bank for the farm stand program, and that had to shut down. The Pittsburgh project lost a lot of its funding, and since Courtney and I were on salary to work up here, we sought to find another way to sustain this property. Initially, my wife and I were kicking around the idea of just farming it for profit, which would be very easy to do, but not necessarily reach the heart of why we had this. Two people not from the neighborhood making a lot of money off of the land didn't seem to be what was best for this neck of the woods, for this property. So we thought through other models that we'd seen, and I had been to a Faith in Farming conference in Laurelville, up in the Laurel Highlands, and I'd met a farmer from North Carolina who had done something similar to this, and it had been written in a book, and they did it as a way of bringing reconciliation to a racially divided neighborhood. And so our thought was perhaps we could do something similar here. We could run it as a community garden, but without giving everyone their own plot, doing it more of in a collective manner. So everyone comes in and puts in time, puts in money, puts in effort, and everyone shares the produce at the end of the season. So that first year, it ran almost exactly as it had done when we were full-time staff. My wife and I worked basically full-time here and full-time at our other jobs, and lots of other volunteers came and helped out. We had tons of help, but everyone still looked to us for the leadership because we'd always been in charge. And so we tried that model a couple more years, and it became apparent quickly that everyone was still relying on Courtney's expertise, my excitement, and history with the farm. And so last year we stepped back from the leadership role and really just took more of a consultant role and just watched as the leaders rose to the top. And it was a beautiful thing to watch from the outside as Charles Chapman jumped in and his wife jumped in, and now we had this beautiful newsletter that went out every week with articles and pictures to see how Gavin had kept investing in the property and putting so much sweat and time into it day in and day out. The way that Carol Gonzalez just continued to have the passion in the heart for taking care of creation and the people that came up, and the numerous other volunteers that came out of the woodworks, to the point where I would come up here and people would introduce themselves to me and ask me who I was. And I thought that was perfect, because now it wasn't Mark's farm, Courtney's farm, the Pittsburgh Project's farm. It really was the community volunteers' farm, and I was just one of many. So that really brings us up to today. We partnered hand in hand with Duquesne, with the Professor Ed, who really took ownership of this area next to the shed here, and they installed a rain garden. It doesn't look like much from here, but the amount of work that went into that was mind-blowing. They had to dig a giant pit. We used the infield, because it was clay, would flood and hold tons of water. Now all that water gets channeled back down there, pools down in that pit, and then there's plants that prefer to grow in the water, growing in that area. They also reclaimed this vacant property back in the corner of the woods here. There was a little creek that ran through. It was all overgrown with poison ivy and dead trees. There was refrigerators, tires, all kinds of garbage back there. And with the help of his students and volunteers, it was all cleared out. The creek has been restored. Benches have been built, and it's a beautiful little parklet back there. And it's just a piece of what we're hoping to do to this area and further out into the woods. The fact that we've got, Andy planting his ramps in the woods and bringing us pawpaws to plant. We've got fruit trees and raspberries and blueberries. It's just really a beautiful testament to what can happen when people come in and volunteer. The fact that there's shiitake mushrooms growing out in the woods and under the under the rain barrels here. The fact that we have rain barrels is all stuff that I had envisioned but had no idea how to do. But all we had to do was throw out the call to the larger community, and people who were excited about or either had that expertise came out and stepped up and did it. So it was always our vision that it was a collective farm where everyone had input, where no one was solely the owner proprietor of the space, but that everyone could involve themselves in however they felt led. So it's been really cool to watch. It's kind of bittersweet. You know, we wished that we had the funding to keep it going the way we were doing with the kids, but it's been encouraging to see what's come about this through the loss of funding, and because now it has to be done by volunteers, or else it will just go back to the vacant lot that it was.